Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm in the dark, you can't see me, never mind. I'm here though. Okay.
Welcome, Venerable. Welcome.
Wonderful.
Hello.
Good. So I'm back in Santa Fe, people. I got back last night and it's now 11 o'clock in the morning for me in Santa Fe.
Oh, lovely.
Okay. So we start with we start thinking, just thinking, put ourselves in the right direction before we sing this prayer, but think of the meaning. It's easy just to get kind of, oh, this is a ritual, you know, but it's thoughts. And the thoughts here are, we're going to make an offering in our hearts, from our hearts, an offering of all the marvelous things of the universe, piling them all up and offering to the Buddha as a request for the teaching. So the teachings are coming out of my mouth. So we imagine we're offering to the Buddha as a request, kind of get the blessings of Buddha's teachings. So Lars can lead, but I think say it in English this time, Lars. And just think of the meaning of the words, you know, these people, you people, offering it to the Buddha as a request for the teachings. And my voice might run out during the class, so we're going to have to see what happens.
This ground, anointed with perfume, strewn with flowers, adorned with marmeru, the four continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as the Buddha land and offer it. May all transmigratory beings enjoy this pure land. Oops. Sorry, here we are. Perfect, pure, holy gurus from the billowing crowds of wisdom and compassion in the sky of the Dharmakaya, please let fall a rain of profound and extensive Dharma upon the receptacle of those to be subdued, exactly as they need.
And now we imagine Buddha very happily receiving our offering. Idam Guru Ratna Mandalakam Niryata Yami. All right. So now the second little thoughts to have, just to remind ourselves that we're relying on I'm going to say in English the first time. And we'll say it in English, okay? So we're thinking that until we're enlightened, we're going to rely upon the Buddha and his teachings. And then by the virtuous karmic seeds we leave in our mind from listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha, no matter how long it takes. So then we can be of benefit to sentient beings. So we rely upon the Buddha, the Dharma, the Sangha, and by the virtue of listening to these teachings, may we become a Buddha to benefit sentient beings. Sangye cherang soke chongnam la janchu baru dagni kyapsu chi dagi chernyan gipe sonam ki drola penchir sangye drubpa shog. All right. So Tara, why don't you just summarize what we discussed last week?
Sure. 1 minute here, 1 second. Let me just make my text a little bigger. So scroll back up. You open just with describing the Lam Rim, the sections compared to the DB modules and how they changed a bit. We talked about we're in the middle of the lower scope now, and then we went into the refuge and the three jewels, and you had some background on a comparison between a Christianity practice, basically Jesus versus a Buddhist point of view. You also you talked about taking the Buddha's view as a hypothesis, and then you take refuge in the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. We're in the lower scope here and also can take the 5 lay vows. Then you went into the reliance on the 3 jewels and started with the refuge in Buddha. And we defined Sangha, or you defined Sangha. You discussed the first goal of the Hinayana path is to graduate at the middle scope. I think I got that correct. And now the great scope is compassion and Buddhahood. And then you talked about, so we posited Buddha, and you defined differences between the absolute Buddha and relative Buddha. Also, the mind of a person who is a Buddha is not limited. Also, stages of a Buddha's path, you talked about the bodhisattvas and the 10 levels. You also mentioned about Nirmakaya, the conceptual relative Buddha.
What, darling?
Excuse me, Nirmanakaya.
We discussed basically absolute Buddha and relative Buddha. We discussed absolute Dharma and relative Dharma.
And then exactly, Dharma, and then the Sangha and the Arya Sangha. And then we had questions.
And we discussed the absolute Sangha and the relative Sangha. So basically,
Sangha, yes.
So I'm really hoping you've again studied the course notes, because I mean, the person who put them together, they're much more detailed, and it's just really good if you supplement what you hear from me with the actual teachings in those course notes. You've got much more details in those course notes, you know, that's the main thing. All right. Okay. Let me just look. Let's look at these course notes and see some points made by the person whose teachings they're from, and then take that as a basis for our discussion today.
Go ahead and share my notes.
No, I'd rather have them here, darling. I don't want
gotcha. Yeah.
That's okay. Thank you for offering, sweetheart.
Yeah. No.
I'll have them here. It's okay. No worries. Okay.
Yes, there were many details.
All right. And I want to see you all as well. Okay. Okay, so these are teachings by an Australian monk called Thupten Dundrup. He's the resident teacher at our centre in Adelaide, Buddha House. Yeah. So as he says, it's the key topic in the Buddha Dharma. It's the entrance into the path, the practice that leads to liberation and enlightenment. It's important and a beautiful topic to study, understand, especially to practice. So, some of you may have taken refuge, some may be thinking to do so. Okay. So the point is, if you're going to start again using ordinary examples, if you're going to enter into, a body of study, a series, whether it's a 10-year course, a 1-year course, which is all we're talking here, you need to really see clearly the way we talk about all the time, talking about how you check a teacher, that's exactly the teaching here about how you check the Buddha. So if we're going to decide we're going to rely upon somebody, say in this case, the Buddha, this is where the very first of these so-called 3 jewels. And what can we do? What have we got available? What we've got available is 2.5 centuries of literature, isn't it? So all we can do is look into that to the best of our ability. So of course, part of the tragedy here is in some place like the modern Western world that doesn't treat religion as kind of like valid philosophy. And so we tend to think it's something you merely believe, and therefore something we think we can make up and decide to change. At least in Tibet, the Tibet, they had this incredible respect for this lineage of, it was the seriousness that we give looking into scientific information is exactly the same seriousness that the Tibetans would take into looking into the past, the previous literature of the Buddha's teachings. We're not like that in the West with religion, I don't think. We make up every new one every day. If you looked at the number of books, and this is the problem, you look at the number of books that are called Buddhist or related to Buddhism. If you really did your research and really did your analysis and really looked back and really did your research and really looked at the material coming from the lineages in the past, you're going to find 90% are rubbish. And this is not meant to be sarcastic or arrogant or thinking anything that we are right and someone else is wrong. Not even saying that, So it's really not easy for us to check up on the Buddha. It's not easy for us because what is available is much of it is just speculation, people's opinions about, So that's why it seems to me, before we even begin looking into the Buddha, you've got to check on the people who teach Buddhism. And that's where you kind of, in a way, it's kind of back to front. How can you check on the Buddha? The only way you're going to find The only way you're going to check on whether Bach is a valid musician, how can you check on Bach's music? It's too complicated. You've got to check on the present people who play and supposedly know Bach's music. That's the only way you're going to be checking. So that means you've got to look into the present teachers. It seems to me, I mean, it's not the way they say it in the books, you know. It's not the way they say it at all. You've got to check on the Buddha. But how can you do that if so much as it's published and that's seen as valid in the modern world is actual rubbish? Is just based on people's own speculation, people's own interpretation of Buddhism. So it's really quite a minefield. It's not that easy. So I'm just talking here, you know. So you've got to have a lot of good fortune, a lot of, you know, to, if you like, stumble across. Almost, often that's what happens. We stumble across Buddhist centers and Buddhist teachings. I mean, I had no concept of what I was doing when I first saw the name Lama Yeshe on a poster, and I had the space and the time, so I went to that course. I didn't know what I was getting in for. I didn't think, oh, well, should I check on this person? I had no idea. I thought, oh, that looks nice, I'll go there. But I mean, if I look back, I didn't think I should check on the validity of these people. But as I was there for those 2 months, I couldn't help but do that, you know. I had no reference point. I had no reference point for anything Buddhist. I think I had one book that one boyfriend had stolen happily and offered to me. It was the first book I'd ever heard of Buddha. It was the Dhammapada. He stole it for me. And I thought that was very nice. And he gave me this probably the first time I'd heard the word Buddhism. There's a book called the Dhammapada. I remember that. It was the first time I saw the Buddhist name. I didn't go from there. I didn't care. But it's like, when I first heard it and started listening to the teachings back then, this very first teaching by Lama Zopa, presenting this classical Tibetan presentation, which is based on the classical presentation from the Indian tradition 1,000 years before that, you know. So all I could do, all I had access to me, all I had accessible to me was this person, you know, and then Lama Yeshe would come in the evenings. So all I had access to was these people. And in a way, every one of us, this is how we met the Dharma, you know. You go to, you know, why do you like to learn music? You never heard of Bach. How can you meet Bach except through a practitioner of Bach? So, you know, it's all very fine to talk about checking the Buddha. That's almost too advanced for us. How can we do that by reading a book, you know? We're not that intelligent. So we've got to have the good fortune, if you like, almost to stumble across valid teachers or teachers who aren't valid, and have to have enough common sense that maybe they're not valid. That's why we've got to be so cautious and not, because we're so attached, we have so much attachment, so much emotion, you know. We go to some teacher, some person, and they're very charismatic, and there's plenty of charismatic spiritual teachers around. You can get completely hooked, you know, because you're moved and your heart's excited. And because we don't treat it with the same validity as a serious scientist, you know very well you might go to some scientific teaching and he might be very charismatic, but you can't judge the validity of that material based on that. You know you've got to go further. So what I'm getting at is that level of clarity and precision and depth of analysis and intelligence we need to use to check up on a body of knowledge, to check up on the people who teach that body of knowledge is really serious, you know. I mean, I remember I always use this example. When I first learned karate, okay? Well, variations of martial arts. The very first time when I was like 29, I was living in the middle of Australia in Alice Springs in the desert. And there was like one club available anyway. And I studied there for like a year. And then I picked it up again when I was in New York. I went to New York about a year later. And because I was a feminist at the time, a very serious feminist, I wanted a female teacher and I wanted a dojo for women. That was my main choice, right? Which is fine. So what I wanted. And I found one. And it was a wonderful community of women. I made very close friends. And I studied for more than a year there. And I maybe got to a brown belt or something. I can't remember. But I didn't check. What I'm getting at is I didn't check on the teacher. The criterion I used was I wanted a female teacher with a female community. And I got that. But I didn't check on her karate. So I did about a year. And I enjoyed myself. I got plenty from it. Don't worry about it. It was a really good thing to do. But I went back to Australia after that. And I wanted to continue karate. So I chose, there was a club that had the similar style. Can't think what's called now, Shaolin or something. That's Kung Fu. I can't remember, it was a Japanese one. So I went to that club, and it was this teacher. And I told him, I said I'd studied in New York and I was about a brown belt or something. He put me in the brown belts. And at the end of the class, he very respectfully said, I'm very sorry, Rabina, but I think you need to go back to the beginning, to the white belts, the very beginning. So of course I was offended, really insulted, you know. And then I thought about it. And that was the first time, that actually was the first time in my life. And that's why, by the way, this is like a parenthetical statement here. Checking the teacher and checking the Buddha, in a way, it's exactly the same process. It's exactly the same, you know. So I know that I realized, it was the first time I realized the necessity to check the quality of a teacher. I mean, I hadn't thought like that before. So for 1 year, and it's only 1 year, and it's only karate, for God Almighty's sake, who cares, you know? I chose the wrong teacher, but I didn't know that what I was learning wasn't valid until this other person whom I stumbled across, and I hadn't checked on him, but he turned out to be a good teacher. So that was just random on my part, but I decided he was right. I trusted him. So that was a real wake-up call for me. I tell you, it was very strong, very powerful. And that's just karate. What is that? You know, nothing. Here, we're talking about methods to transform your mind. So this is where, you know, it's like when we say we're looking for a spiritual path, we don't know anything more than that. But that's a very broad label. I mean, look how broad that is. Within that, you've got every conceivable type of yoga, relaxation techniques, Australian Aboriginal religion, American Indian religion, Icelandic religion. You've got a million different kinds of philosophies over the last many centuries, you know, taught by human beings. It's a vast label. So we vaguely know what we mean by spiritual path. And then, so you've got to start somewhere. So that's exactly what happened to me. It's a very broad label, so broad it's ridiculous, you know. I knew I wanted something more than merely political. I wanted something more than merely material. I'd been brought up a Catholic, I'd given it up, and I wanted to go back to something spiritual. I didn't know more than that. I couldn't articulate it more than that. So part of that process was doing karate, you know, martial arts. So then I remember wanting something more still. And I remember I thought, okay, I'll try different things. I went back to maths. It didn't work for me. And I learned Transcendental Meditation. And I learned a mantra. I liked the idea of it, but I didn't have any philosophy. I wanted philosophy. So I kept looking and kept looking. And then I fell into the lap of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa at this course in Queensland, you know. So it was only then that I started to be able to be more precise about what I meant by a spiritual path. So then you hear the word, for example, you hear the word enlightenment. Now that word, you're going to find 27 different definitions of the word enlightenment. You're going to find, you know, enlightenment of the European enlightenment, you know, all about art or whatever it was. I don't even know. I haven't learned history. Then you've got to find enlightenment when it comes to anything. So you've got to be precise about your labels. So for me, first of all, I had, you know, it was like a recognition of these lamas and their teachings, although I didn't have a clue what they were talking about. So in a sense, you could say I was fortunate to fall into their lap. But I did the research as I was with them. I did check the teacher. I did check the qualities. I did check the students. I did check the words. I did that, you know. Which is what it really means here when you take refuge. Whom are you going to rely upon? What for? So then you hear Buddha say, you hear the Buddha's view of enlightenment, and then you're going to hear, for example, the Hinayana view. There are many levels of teachings in Buddhism. So there's one, enlightenment is exactly the word they use, and that's the enlightenment of having, you know, achieved your own liberation from suffering and its causes. That's the meaning of this word nirvana. So there's that enlightenment, which is, you know, if you take the Lam Rim as our packaging, that's the lowest and middle scopes. That's the Hinayana path. That's the wisdom wing, all these words I use. Now, but then you've got the Mahayana enlightenment. So it happened to be the lamas I heard were discussing that enlightenment, those teachings of the Buddha. They're all the teachings of the Buddha. And so I fell into their lap, but then you do the research as you go along. And so you start to get some perspective, you know. So it really does, it's an unfolding process. You have to have it this way. There's no other choice, you know. We've got to use our intelligence. We've got to start getting an understanding of the language that these different paths use. They've all got their own language, the meaning. So you'd say enlightenment, but there are 27, as I said, 27 definitions of it. Which one are you talking about? So in the beginning, I didn't know I wanted the path to Buddhahood. I'd never heard such a thing. So it's a bit catch-22. How do you know what you're looking for if you don't even know it's available? Like I said, the broadest label we can have is spiritual path, a vague notion, you know, something internal. So you've got to find your own way. You've got to navigate. You've got to navigate, you know. So this is also the interesting point. This is not all in the teachings here at this moment. I'm just giving general words here. Okay, a broader kind of a way of looking at it all. So the thing is, if we take the view of karma, that who we are in this life is mainly the product of what we programmed in past lives. What we are attracted to, for example, is not just a random thing, which it feels like to us. I didn't see any logic in my suddenly seeing a poster that said Lama Yeshe and my suddenly having the space and time in my life to go to this course and then falling into their lap. That wasn't so-called planned by me. It looked random, you know. But if we have the view of karma, then I clearly have created the cause in the past life, having a connection with these people, having a connection with that particular path, having a connection with the word Buddha, having a connection with the word Mahayana. So you set yourself up in the past life for what you meet in this life. So if we are fortunate to come across valid teachers, and I'm not saying Buddhist or not Buddhist here, I'm saying valid people at whatever level of validity, you know, then aren't we fortunate? I mean, when you read the stories of people who get caught up in kind of wacko, weird religious philosophies, you know, go off and then all end up killing each other or themselves, or, you know, you look on it from the face value, it seems like you think, how can these people believe this is true? You know, that's the way karma works. We set ourselves up from the past, and then we bump into people in the present, and then those ideas appeal to us. So if we do happen to stumble across good spiritual teachers, I'm not saying they're just Buddhist, who've got reasonable views that are based in good ethics, then oh my goodness, how fortunate we are, you know, whether it's called religious, whether it's called Christian or Muslim, I don't care. I mean, that's where, so you've got, and in the end, that's why it's so important to think through things like good ethics. Because if any religious philosophy, if any philosophy, a view of the world, I would suggest, is not based on fundamentally good ethics, which is at least try not to harm others, and then to recognize we all want to be happy and don't want to suffer. If it's not based on this, then I think you're lost completely, you know, completely lost. So this is why this is why the idea of religion being something made up. This is why the Buddhist one is so clear. It's natural law. It's natural law, you know, not a belief system, natural law. And it has to be rooted in ethics. So I think if you have that as a basis, then you won't go wrong. So maybe you've got a connection with the creator concept. Maybe that's your lineage, as they say. You've got to find that out. Okay, Buddhists would argue with that philosophically. They have extensive arguments. That's where Buddha diverged from the Hindus. His own experiential observations of these views and his own assessment of what is true and what is valid and what is not. But if you've got a connection with a creator, you're going to find if it's valid, it'll be based on good ethics. If it's materialist and secular, it'll be based on good ethics. That has to be a fundamental basis shared by anybody. So I mean, these types of things, you use your common sense, you use your common sense, you know. But to have a mind that is common sense, that also is pretty fortunate. How fortunate we are to be able to access our intelligence and make choices and be wise. It's not that easy. And if you look at the world, you can see the crazy things that people believe. truly believe as truth, all the conspiracy theories, all the wacky things, believing that killing is right, believing that steal is right, believing, I mean, the bizarre things that humans do, you know. I mean, it's a minefield. So to have enough common sense, be born in this world with some common sense and a wish to not harm others and a wish even to benefit others, my goodness, that's pretty fortunate. You know? I'm just talking here, okay? I'm just talking. So if you want to rely upon the Buddha, that means you're choosing the knowledge, you're choosing to buy into, to take as your hypothesis and then to buy into, and then to gradually program your mind with the very thoughts that the Buddha has presented as his assessment of how things exist. That's it, you know. Just like you're going to buy into Einstein's presentation of how things exist. You can't prove it in the beginning. You listen, you check up, and then you take it as your hypothesis, and then you gradually buy into, by not just believing and memorizing it all, but by internalizing it and proving it for yourself. That's the thing that will keep you grounded in sanity, you know. You've got to prove it each step of the way for yourself. Then you can't go wrong. It's very rigorous, it's humble, it's slow, you know, but this, if you use that as your methodology, you can't go wrong. Because Einstein is either right or he's wrong. Buddha is either right or he's wrong. Jesus is either right or he's wrong. Stalin is either right or he's wrong. And we're not talking moralistic right and wrong. We're not talking fundamentalist right and wrong. We're not talking belief right and wrong. We're talking about actual reality. If you follow like that, you can't go wrong. But you've got to start somewhere, you know. So in my case, I fell into the lap of Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa at this 2 months of teachings. It was a struggle, enormous struggle. So many of the philosophies argued directly with the philosophies in my head at the time. But I persevered. I checked these people. I checked the disciples. I checked the words. I checked the viewpoints, you know, and I continued to go and go. And then before I left, I took refuge. I decided, yes, I'm going to rely upon the Buddha, his teachings, and the spiritual community. So it moved on from there, you know. And then after that, the next year, I then decided Lama Yeshe was the person in this life who would be the embodiment for me of these teachings. You know, I relied upon Lama. So it went in that order for me, like it does. It is common for people. I'm just talking, okay? I'm just talking. Dundrup is not talking like this in his course notes. I'm just talking. But I really want you to read Dundrup's course notes. In each case, these people's teachings are so helpful. I'm so happy these people, I just say rubbish, you know, I just say make up things. Well, I hope I don't make up too much. So that's the attitude, that's the approach, you know. And you go one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. So to actually check on Buddha, you check first. You go to the classes, you're hearing here. So this reference point. So even, for example, you know, you're going to read some, say, for example, some of the literature from the Theravadan tradition. So recently someone gave me a book by one Australian Theravadan monk whom I know, who lives in Perth, and he's quite popular, Ajahn Brahm. And it's a book about meditation, but it's all Buddhist teachings, exactly the same as you're going to get from a Tibetan teacher, but it's using Pali language, it's using the reference points and the way and the phraseology and the way of talking from his tradition for the last 2,500 years. But it was like another language. I hardly understood a word he said. And that's going to be reasonable because there's so many sources, you know. So even when it comes to that, you're not sure when you first meet the Buddhist teachings, well, am I Theravadan? Am I Hinayana? Am I Mahayana? Am I Zen? Am I Tibetan? You're going to find that out. It's a bit like yoga. It's one term, but it's a vast term, isn't it? That covers so many styles. And as you keep looking, you're going to narrow down your options until eventually you find the style and the teacher that fits with your mind. And then you get more precise and more precise and more precise. It's exactly the same here, you know. So that's lots of people, I mean, you know, might say in this tradition, might be coming to this course and might take refuge, let's say, formally from a Tibetan Buddhist monk or something. But eventually they really find a connection with the Theravada tradition. Totally appropriate. You do what you have to do, you know. But the refuge, that the point is the teachings of the Buddha at the different stages presented differently and seem supposedly different language, but they're fundamentally the same. They have to be if they're valid teachings. They can't be made up by the Thais and then the Theravadins, then the Chinese make up another one and the Tibetans make up another one. It can't be like that. Just they present from different cultures in different words. Just like I'm sure if you heard, you know, the Russian Orthodox presentation of Christianity and some little church down in, you know, down in Louisiana, you would not recognize the teachings. They're completely different presentations from different languages, different cultures. That's okay. But if they're valid, you're going to get to the essence, you know. So that's up to us, one step at a time, using our intelligence, checking up each step of the way. I don't know. Ask me some questions. Must be having jet lag. I don't usually get jet lag, but here I am drinking my third cup of ginger and cardamom chai and honey. Maybe I'm stoned on tea or something. Ask me some questions.
Christine has a question.
Mm-hmm. Hello, Christine. Talk to me, darling.
Hello. Good morning, Venerable Bina. From Southern California.
Yes,
good morning.
Exactly. Yes, darling.
What you're speaking this morning about vows really hits for me because
sorry, start that sentence.
What you're speaking this morning really resonates with me.
Okay, good.
Because I did take Buddhist vows with an organization that was not that's had a lot of issues over the last 5 or 7 years, and I feel like I need to start again from scratch. How do you not throw the baby out with the bathwater?
Right, that's a very good question. The analogy for me, the example is that karate. Okay, and I must use as a simple example. Maybe I didn't check. I learned wrongly, but I couldn't chuck it all out. There were still some things that I learned that were valid karate. Are you seeing my point, Christine? So you have to distinguish between the facts and the fiction. Whatever the problems are, you look at what you did get that was part of your path, you move forward. Because when you say you took refuge and vows, you didn't take refuge and vows, you didn't take refuge in the group, you took refuge in the Buddha. So that can never be changed. That's marvelous. It's just that you maybe discovered this group aren't so valid or whatever you're saying, it doesn't matter. But then you still take what you got from them and you keep moving. You don't chuck the baby out the bathwater, darling. Are you able to do that? Take what you can, the best that you got, and be grateful for it and learn about your own mind and keep moving. I think that's what you're doing, surely. What do you think?
I guess that's why I continue to explore this path with you, because I am now questioning what I was taught, because the Rinpoche of the organization has left the organization, and there are criminal charges and so on and so forth.
Don't worry about all that, darling. Don't worry about all that. It's all superfluous. Tell me, give an example. You said some things you've learned that were wrong. Give me one example of one teaching that they said was Buddhism that you think now was wrong. Give me one. You've got to be precise, Christine, not just get caught up in the emotion. What is one teaching that you can think of that you're saying was wrong, that you've discovered is now wrong? What do you mean by that, Christine?
So I think probably the one that pops to my mind the quickest is holding a higher regard for the leaders of the organization as opposed.
I'm discussing Buddha's teachings, darling.
Right.
I'm discussing
right.
Buddha's teachings. So what is that's not a Buddhist teaching. What do you mean higher regard? I mean, what is wrong with higher regard for a start? For whom? And what is the teaching you're saying was wrong? So you go on, complete what you're saying. Sorry, darling, go on.
Holding a higher regard for the leaders of the organization than for Buddhism itself, or for the Buddhas, or for the path.
Where'd you get those words?
Putting the organization prior.
Where did you get those words from? Where did you get those exact words from? Who told you that? What do you mean? You mean you learned that you as a student have to regard the leaders of the organization and the organization as higher than the Buddha. Is that what you're saying you learned?
Yes. I was with Shambhala for about 20 years.
But where did you see, why would you say Shambhala told you that? I mean,
because that was,
huh?
Because I think, so for me personally, I mean, I trusted what was being said as opposed to going in and reading the Dharma myself.
I understand. I do not want to criticize Shambhala. You've had experiences. This is where you've got to get your facts clear. All I can say is I've known many good Shambhala students. I have great respect for many of the students. I have great respect for Trungpa. I do have respect, even though his behavior was unusual. So, I mean, there's different approaches to different things. All I can say is you've got to learn yourself. Mainly the learning for you, darling, is about your choices and your own mind. You've got to learn about that. Take what is good from what you learned, Christine. Take what is good of what you learned, and then keep moving forward, sweetheart, and be happy that you learned something. There's no benefit in you going against people. There's no benefit in you being upset or angry or hurt or resentful. I'm not suggesting you are. I'm just saying there's no benefit to you of doing that. Keep your mind open. One simple way to put it is, it wasn't the path for you. That's probably the best approach, sweetheart.
That's really awesome. Thank you for that, Venerable. Thank you.
That's the best way, darling. That's the simplest way. Don't try to squeeze your brain and think, well, that was wrong and this was wrong. It's just part of your own. We learn from our experiences, Christine, you know. So keep it in your mind. Don't criticize. Keep it there. Learn, you know, this is part of your path. It's led you to where you are now. You learn from it and you be grateful for what you got and leave the rest alone. It's really important to do that.
Thank you, Venerable.
Good, darling. Keep moving, darling, and keep checking. That's the main thing. Who else has questions, please?
Anyone a question? There's also the chat box if you'd like to type. Oh, we're silent tonight.
Tara, don't talk like that.
Oh, sorry.
Don't make jokes about people. They're allowed to be silent if they want to. Nothing wrong with that.
You're right. You're correct. Sorry.
Nothing? Okay. So again, okay, so maybe this is a discussion here in Dundrup in one of his talks, you know, does Buddha mind exist? These are the types of things we've got to think about, you know, this is quite difficult for our minds. So this is where you've got to analyze, you've got to analyze what Buddha's saying. So if you're a Mahayanist, you will read that the Buddha's teaching is that every sentient being possesses Buddha nature. That's how they put it, you know. So how can you intellectually work with that? How can you prove that intellectually? There's lots of thinking you have to do. If he's saying this is possible, you know, if you meet some scientist and said something is possible, you need to try and find the way to see if you can check it even intellectually. All this is part of the process, isn't it? So, okay. So first of all, Buddha, as we've discussed, the etymology of that word is very simple but very tasty. It suggests the eradication from the mind of all neuroses and delusions, and 2, the development to perfection of all the virtues and all the goodness. So it's an extremely simple statement. And even if we compare it with, say, the Christian teachings, you possibly might come across something similar. But if you compare it with the psychological teachings in the modern world, you will find nothing similar. It's a bizarre, very strange concept. So then you think, well, okay, what am I going to have to look at here? And we've done all this discussion. You know, I've got to look at then what, if it's true that all sentient beings possess the potential to achieve this, I've got to analyze what is a sentient being. So then we see the difference in the Buddha's view, that there are trillions upon trillions upon trillions of mind possessors. This lovely word in Buddhism, the Tibetan word for sentient being, mind possessor, sem chen, a haver of mind, a mind possessor. So we've got to assert that. That's a radically different view, you know. We've got to assert that. So then we have to look at what is mind then. Then we hear the Buddha tell us that mind is not physical. Mind is not the brain. Mind is not the handiwork of someone else, a creator or mummy or daddy. Mind cannot come from nothing. Mind is the product of the law of cause and effect. I mean, there's masses of thinking we have to do here. That's kind of interesting thinking, but also necessary to get our head around what he's saying. So then you have to look at, all you can do is take this as your hypothesis. Then you have to look at what does he mean by the words they use. You know, this nice phrase, all sentient beings possess Buddha nature. We don't talk like that. I always use the example of an acorn. We all know an acorn is a seed that if you put it in the ground, nice piece of earth, and give it some water and, you know, some maybe, you know, some fertilizer and the right amount of light and the right amount of warmth and the right amount of time, we know it will turn into an oak tree. So that's a good analogy. In what you'd say, using that analogy, what you'd say is, logically, by definition, an acorn, all acorns, by definition, possess oak tree nature. It's a cute way to put it, but you listen, it's absolutely perfect thinking. By definition, an acorn is a potential oak tree. If it is an acorn, then what defines its very existence is its potential to be an oak tree. We absolutely understand these words. That's exactly what the Buddha is saying about all minds. What finally, for the Mahayana point of view, in the Buddhist teachings, what defines a mind is its potential to be a Buddha. So then we say, well, what's a Buddha? So that means every mind has the potential, one, to remove all delusions. Then we have to study the Buddhist psychological model. What does that mean? That means all the things we, in the Western materialist models, in the neuroscientific models, we utterly take them for granted as an actual component of a valid person. So we would say an ordinary person, an ordinary mind, would necessarily need to have some level of ego, some level of fear, some level of attachment, some level of anger, some level of jealousy. By definition, that's what we would say from the neuroscientific point of view and from most psychological points of view, that what defines a mind in our culture would be a mind that's got some of those, and indeed, fortunately, hopefully, some of the good stuff. So the Buddha's view is what defines the very existence of a mind, its ultimate nature, is its Buddha nature. And the ultimate nature of a mind is its Buddha nature, which means it's each mind by definition. What defines its existence is its potential to be, one, free of all the delusions, and two, full of all the goodness. It's a simple, simple way of putting it, but it's a valid statement when it comes to the Mahayana view, the Buddhist point of view. So that's the goal, therefore. And so the methodology, once you've established an acorn possesses the potential to be an oak tree, then your job is to find the method of how to accomplish that oak tree. That's it. So if you hear the Buddha say that Buddha, by definition, the etymology is a simple word, what's implied by it is the removal of all delusions and the development to perfection of all goodness, you had better learn the Buddhist model of the mind, very obviously, because it is not how we think in the modern psychological views or in the neuroscientific views. It's very clear. So these are the words we have to use, one step at a time, putting all the pieces of the puzzle together. Because it's a pretty radical statement, you know. It's an outrageous statement. And if we look at psychologically how we feel instinctively, it's a crazy idea. Because we all believe instinctively, look at us. We believe that anger and attachment and jealousy and despair and anxiety are at the core of our being. This comes really naturally. This is the most tragic obstacle for us to even hear this concept that we've all got Buddha nature. That's why we analyze it carefully and even intellectually try to see the logic of it. It can be very, very, very encouraging. Not just believe it blindly, you know. So that means, this is where we talked about the mind, module 1, but let's talk about it here too, why not? Let's look at the logic of this statement, the delusions, as they say in Buddhist psychology, that Buddha has found that they are adventitious. So here this means they're not at the core of our being. They're not a fundamental part of our nature. It's not at the core of our being. They don't finally define who we are finally. Wisdom and virtue, wisdom and virtue, wisdom and goodness. These are the things that the Buddha would say define our existence. And when they are perfected, that's Buddha, you know, that's the fundamental potential of every living being. I mean, it's delicious words to hear. It's very unusual. It's delicious to hear this. So that's why we have to learn the Buddhist model of the mind, like we discussed in module 1, very briefly, you know. We have to look into the characteristics of the so-called unhappy states of mind, the neurotic states of mind, the delusions, the non-virtues, the negative states of mind, all these synonyms, you know, the disturbing states of mind. Because this is the the fundamental point the Buddha is making, and this is again about the mind, more in the mind module than here, but it's valid here. The key point that Buddha is making is that the function of the delusions, the function of ego grasping, attachment, anger, jealousy, and all these are the emotional afflictions that Buddha talks about. But also there are these other views that, like philosophical viewpoints, Buddha would say fundamentally aren't true. He's not being fundamentalist. He's not being sectarian. He will tell us that not only do we have ego grasping that believes I'm a separate, concrete, real me, not only do we have attachment that exaggerates the deliciousness of the other person or the object or whatever, not only do we have anger that over-exaggerates the ugliness of the object, we also have these other views in the mind that we would argue are philosophical positions, you know, such as the concept of a creator, such as the concept of cause and effect, the concept of a soul, the concept of mind being not physical, the concept of the brain being your mind, the concept of your mother and father creating you. These are all the philosophical positions that exist in the world, aren't they? So Buddha's deal is, and of course all the religions have the same, they've all got their own views. They would all argue with each other, and that's completely reasonable. Buddha is presenting his findings about what he has seen to be fact. I think when it comes to religious philosophy, we get very nervous when we say the truth, you know, the truth. That sounds a bit scary to us because we feel if it's the truth, then I'm right and you're wrong. And then we have all these religious wars. I mean, look at us, you know, the truth. But I think I like the word fact. And this is the Buddha's point. Facts can be proved. But this is where Buddha is radically, radically, radically different from the creator religions. Because if you can say you can prove God to be right or wrong, then you are equal to God, and you simply cannot say that. By definition, you cannot say that. So the Buddha is different. If, as Dalai Lama says to us in the West, in the modern world, if you can prove that Buddha is wrong, then you must reject him. This is completely reasonable and logical, but that's the Buddhist approach. So the Buddha's whole deal is that all these misconceptions in the mind, all these emotional views are all philosophical positions. Anger is a philosophical position. Attachment is a philosophical position. The view of karma is a philosophical position. The view of a creator is a philosophical position. And if we unpack them, we have to discover, are they in sync with reality or not? That's our job. That's the Buddhist approach. So you've got to start with your hypothesis. Then you've got to define your terms. You've got to know the language you're using. How can you possibly discuss mathematics if you can't even have a definition of a word? You know, it's like a joke. This is the thinking we have to do, one step at a time, you know. So all sentient beings possess the potential to be free of all the delusions. And why can you be free of them? Because they are mistaken conceptions. They're not in sync with reality. That's the thing we have to comprehend. All the philosophical positions in our mind, Buddha says, from eons of practice, that are misconceptions: creator, materialism, the mind's brain, that your mummy created you, that your mummy gave you good music or anger, no cause and effect, all the different views, the philosophical views. It's not being fundamentalist. You listen to what Buddha says. He is saying he is presenting what he has found to be true, which argues with the other prevailing views. And that's the position. That's what we tried to do. Prove it to be true. So if there is a view in our mind that can be proven to not be in sync with the facts, then you can remove it. A simple example, the simplest example. If I'm learning math and I say, and I'm trying to repeat what I've learned, and I say, oh yeah, that's right, you told me, didn't you? 1 + 1 is 3. And you'll say, Rabina, don't be silly, you forgot. It's 1 + 1 is 2. Oh, I go, oh, you're right. Of course you're right. So listen to this. 1 + 1 is 3 is a concept. It's a viewpoint. It's an opinion. It's a thought. And it did exist in my mind for a moment. Then along came you, and who corrected me, and I remembered that you were right, and I forgot. And I said, of course you're right. 1 + 1 is 2. So that is also a thought, a concept, a viewpoint, an opinion. So this is just conventional reality. Then we have to prove conventionally which one is fact. We know conventionally 1 + 1 is 2 is fact. So if I then buy into that fact, I accept you're right because I remembered it and I have proven it, but I just forgot temporarily, then what you got to ask the question. First, I had the thought 1 + 1 is 3. Then you helped me fix it. And then I said, of course, you're right. 1 + 1 is 2. And I've proven it from before, and I've convinced because I've proven it. So what happened to the previous thought? What happened to the thought 1 + 1 is 3? Well, we know what happened to it. It disappeared into a puff of smoke. It disappeared into nothingness. And the point is this: What made it go from my mind is my conviction of the truth. If I'm wavering, well, I'm not sure. Maybe 1 + 1 is 3. Maybe it's 2. Then they'll both be in my mind. I'll have this conflict. I always quote this, but this is often they describe this as a process that you go through as you study, listen, think about, study, learn, and finally internalize a body of knowledge. So, of course, we're discussing here the Buddhist approach to what is real and what is not. So you start with wrong view. They call it that. So wrong view would be, let's say we use the analogy, say the example, a simple example of, let's say, a place called Melbourne. And you've never heard of such a place called Melbourne. You lived in some little village in America, and you've never heard of anything past your own, 5 mile. It's like some people live like that. So anywhere. And you go, don't be ridiculous. There's no such place as Melbourne. Come on. That's called wrong view. But as I say, it's wrong view. And you think it's a joke, but then you think, well, I better start looking into this. And you start expanding your knowledge, and you start to read about maps, and you start to go, wow, that's interesting. And you start to move from wrong view to what they call doubt, tending towards the wrong view. So your mind starts to shake a little bit. You do some research. And then you go, well, maybe there is a place called Melbourne. No, can't be possible, can't be possible. But you keep doing your research, and gradually you move from doubt tending towards the wrong view to now being doubt tending towards the right view, based not on just belief, but on your research. So now you go, well, maybe there is a place called Melbourne. Still not sure, but you're tending towards the right view that there is a place called Melbourne. So then you keep doing your research, and you keep doing your research, and you now get to what they call correct belief, which is quite stable already, but based on a lot of research, but no real intellectual conviction yet. But you keep doing your research, and you keep studying the maps, and you even start to listen to people who say they've even been to a place called Melbourne. And you start doing your research, and you start checking on airplanes and go here, and you get off there, and you get to Singapore, then you change flights, and you get to a place, and it says it. And by the time now you get to inferential certainty, you could pass an exam proving intellectually the existence of Melbourne by showing all the maps, quoting people's experiences. You can do that. We know we can do that. You haven't yet had the direct experience of Melbourne, but you could pass it. You could even tell other people how to get to Melbourne, because you're now so convinced. You've got inferential certainty. And then finally you get to Melbourne, and that's when you experience the truth of the existence of Melbourne. This is how you become a Buddha. This is how you prove 1 + 1 is 2. This is how you prove E = mc². This is how you prove anything to be fact. It's like that. So it's logical. You've got to use your noggin. But we are so addicted to believing you can't prove religious philosophy. And that's valid if you have faith in a creator. So it's a very major difference, So I'm just discussing these points here. So then, does Buddha mind exist? You've got to first hypothesize you've got to hear what Buddha says, and then you try to think about it. Even for us, the concept that there are thoughts in our mind that aren't valid is not how we think. We think validity means the fact that I've got it. That's what validates it. You have got it. But the Buddhist point is, our mind at the level we function right now is only conceptual, which means that we live at the level of thoughts. We live at the level of opinions. We live at the level of viewpoints. We live at the level of concepts. And some concepts are in sync with reality, and some are not. And we're still only talking conventional reality. This is a very fascinating way to see the world, isn't it? You must admit. I find it delicious, I tell you. So this is sorting ourselves out even at the conventional level. And the Buddha's telling us that we're already in la-la land, even when it comes to conventional reality. And this is why we suffer. We believe that we believe in the story of attachment, that person will make me happy. We believe in the story of anger, that person is the cause of my suffering. We believe in all the conspiracy theories of this and that, and he this and she that, and they this. We believe, so much garbage, our minds, the Buddha would suggest, we're full of garbage concepts. And we believe in them. Bad enough, as Lama Zopa says, that the world appears back to us wrongly. That is to say, through the lenses of our own misconceptions. Bad enough that that's how things appear to us. But the worst part is we believe they are true. This is huge work. This is the job of being a Buddhist every day, this is more than our topic here, but I'm just discussing it, okay? So the key thing we're looking at is to see if it seems logically coherent that that you can rid the mind of concepts that don't have a valid basis. For example, 1 + 1 is 2, or 1 + 1 is 3. It's a simple example of a convention. And the Buddha says there's a conventional way that things exist, and then there's the ultimate way that things exist. And the method to get the ultimate way that things exist is to first go through the methods of getting the conventional way that things exist. So we can see, if I'm convinced that 1 + 1 is 2 because I've proven it, the power of that thought is what counteracts the previous thought. 1 + 1 is 3. And the more I'm convinced about the truth of 1 + 1 is 2, then that literally is what annihilates from my mind the invalid thought. And that's how you become enlightened. That's how you realize emptiness. So, after all the hard work of listening to dependent arising teachings, how this is this and this is that, and you slowly through meditation, you get shamatha at the subtle level of your mind, you use the analysis of dependent arising, you get deeper and deeper logic, more subtle, more subtle, more subtle, and eventually at some point in your meditation, you will see for the first time that there never has been, isn't, and never could be that intrinsic, independent, real, pointable, findable, concrete, separate I that you have believed in since beginningless time. So what brings the conviction of that absence is the conviction of dependent arising. So the conventional facts prove the ultimate. It's a process we have to go through. But getting this right first intellectually can intellectually understanding that all the emotional dramas are rooted in being misconceptions. This is unique to the Buddhist approach. It's most fascinating. And then having this confidence that they're adventitious, that they're not, because they're not in sync with reality, you can remove them from your mind. And why would you want to? Because they are causing you to suffer, because you're not in touch with reality. That's the whole point. This is the type of thinking. So as Jundrup says here, the traditional presentations that Lamas give us, they assume that Buddha mind exists and they teach from that point of view. But many of us never heard of the concept of Buddha mind, So we've got to start looking at these words because it doesn't exist in our culture. It doesn't exist in our religions. There's nothing like it. It's quite unique. So we've got to understand what he means by this. And this is, so we've discussed, that's right. Anyway, so any questions from all these people? Any questions?
There's one question in the chat box. David, would you like to ask?
Talk to me.
Or I'll read it.
Please do.
Does one need to go through a formal initiation or process to look to you, Venerable Robina, as their teacher? Specifically, am I permitted to refer to you as my teacher or Lama? Thank you. Or am I overstepping or being presumptuous?
No, sweetheart, of course you're not. No, that's very much our own decision. That's very important. We do this, like we're discussing this general one of trying to look into who the Buddha is and what the Buddha is. And as I said before, that's very similar for us of trying to, because we only have access to present people. We don't have access to the Buddha, So it's important we do that, absolutely necessary. So having done your research and done your checking and done your listening and thinking and analyzing and listening to the teachings and checking on the person and their qualities and their reputation and their students, you do all of that checking. You must do that. And then if you have some conviction in your mind that this person would be one of your teachers, then it's totally valid to see them that way. But it's also very nice to make a connection with that person, So you might find their email address and you might go to their teachings and you might request a meeting and you can discuss this with that person. That would be totally valid, sweetheart. That would be totally appropriate. Yes. Next question. Any more questions there, Tara?
There we go. Is it Christy?
Yes. Christy, talk to me, my dear. You're off. You better unmute yourself, my dear. Yes. Thank you so much. Good. There we go. Talk to me.
Welcome back to Santa Fe.
Thank you, darling. Happy to be here. It's like I never left. 3 months gone. Like I never left. It's so peculiar. That's how our minds are, isn't it? It's very strange. I had breakfast with Matt this morning, and it's just like as if we had tea yesterday, It's very curious. Okay, go on.
Nice. We're going to try to get some sunshine back for you.
There we go. Good. Yes, exactly. I think it's going to snow here tonight. They say that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for your teachings. Very valuable. I'm going to go off topic just a little bit.
Please, of course, it doesn't matter. Anything.
Great. It's let me get this back on my phone here. Oh, this is from the practice manual for this.
Good. Yes.
For this module, the foundation of all good qualities. It's a prayer.
Oh, okay, good. Let me open it up. It's in all of them, I think. I'll get it. Let me open it up and we can discuss the lines you're talking about.
Oh, I can read you a line.
Okay, good, darling. You read it to me. Yes, good. Go on then.
The foundation of all good qualities is the kind and perfect guru. Correct devotion to him is the root of the path. By clearly seeing this and applying great effort, please bless me to rely upon him with great respect. And then each verse that follows has a similar refrain. Please bless me to venerate the mind. Please bless me to always be careful, and so on. You know my religious background or my non-religious background.
Exactly.
How can I see it in my own mind when I say these words?
How can you say what? Say the words.
How can I see this in my own mind when I say these words?
I understand. Okay, I understand. Okay. So can I ask you, I always like to use simple analogies. Have you ever had a mentor of any kind, learning math, learning music, learning how to shoot a gun, learning anything? Have you had a person you'd refer to as a person you learned from, whom you respected?
Absolutely.
Okay, then. It's the same. You mightn't say in your mind, please bless me, Fred, but you might say, I hope I make Fred happy. I hope I've done the right thing, having a conversation with Fred about how to do the job properly. And then you want to please Fred, and then you're delighted to tell Fred what you achieved. It's a bit like that. The relationship is like that when it comes to the so-called guru, the spiritual mentor. It's a person we hold in our mind. Even if they're not there, we want to please them. We've chosen that person to guide us to learn how to be a better person, learn how to be a musician, learn how to, like when was my Kung Fu with my Mr. Lee, when I did Kung Fu later, after my the other teacher, later on I did Kung Fu when I was in London. I was 10 years older and I found a Kung Fu teacher, Mr. Lee, and I checked on him this time and he was a valid teacher. So I trained with him every day. So when I'm doing my own training at home, I'm obviously thinking about what Mr. Lee's been teaching me. And I want to make Mr. Lee happy when I go back next class. We're human like that. So that's a bit like that. I mightn't say to during my training at home, I mightn't go, please bless me, Mr. Lee. I won't say that. But in a sense, it's similar to that. The major difference here is we're taking the view here in Buddhism that the mind is not physical. We're taking the view that people have the power to become this Buddha, whose mind pervades the universe, who knows everything, which sounds like God, but is not God. We're taking that view here. So the concept of that person's mind is that they're powerful and they do exist. And in a sense, our own practice is relating to them in our heart. That's what they mean by devotion. And really, you are the one who thinks that, and you are the one who gets nourishment from that. You kind of imagine getting their approval. Blessing just means like their approval, if you like. It's a way of putting it in the very down to earth. So if you have a teacher, like for me, as my relationship with my spiritual teachers, my mentors, Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I mean, I've had very few meetings with them personally where they tell me what to do, but I study their teachings. I use them as my example of Buddha in human body. I refer to them. I want to please them. I do their wishes, and I talk to them sometimes in my mind. So it's like that. Does that make sense? It is a very personal relationship. If you haven't been religious, it sounds a bit weird, but it's something that nourishes your heart. I can say that very really. It's a very practical method for opening the heart. If you have a relationship with a teacher, even if people have got a therapist, not if you've done any therapy, but people love their therapist. They refer to their therapist. They rely on their therapist. They want to please their therapist. Like as a child with your parents, you rely on that person. You think of that person. You get courage from listening to that person. You want to make them happy. It's a really good quality to have. That's why as one Lama says, you better choose your spiritual mentor very carefully because you're going to end up like them. So don't choose some peanut. So it's a very human thing, I think, to have this open heart, to have this devotion. It loosens the kind of the sense of separateness and loneliness. That's my words for it. It's very beneficial. You understand?
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I knew there was a problem, with English translation. Sometimes
I know, of course.
Communicate the real meaning.
It's very much, we've got to bring these words down to earth. It's so incredibly important, Christy. It's so good that you asked that. Thank you so much. Thank you. What else, people? I'm running out of voice. I'm afraid I might have to give up very soon. My voice is practically gone.
John?
Yeah. Hi, Venerable. Thanks for tonight. So, sometimes I do understand some of my delusions intellectually, at least, but I don't feel like I really realize them. It feels like arguing with or trying to reason with a child throwing a tantrum.
There you go. Well done. That's exactly how it is.
It's very hard to kind of move past it. I realize that what I'm seeing is not the truth in a way, but it's very hard for it to stick. Have you got any advice?
Yes, darling. I mean, what you're just telling me is you're learning to play the piano and you do your best, but you keep stumbling, you keep making mistakes. What should I do? Well, guess what the answer is, Amjad?
Keep trying.
Thank you, baby. You
cool.
Just answered.
Amazing.
Keep moving, not keep trying. Don't say try. You are doing the job. Often when we say, I try, there's an assumption of failing. I mean, you can't play Bach overnight, honey. You've got to start somewhere and you've got to rejoice at the very first level, but you see that you've got to keep moving. So you pick it up and you just rejoice. You're doing your best. You just keep moving. I swear, if we understand it like that, we will persevere. And we'll rejoice at each level of our practice, not abuse ourselves all the time, which we love to do. We'll just keep moving because we'll just keep moving and get better and better. There's a lovely saying the Tibetans have. Instead of saying practice makes perfect, theirs is beautiful. It says nothing ever gets more difficult with practice. It's very sweet, isn't it? So, honey, your words show you are doing exactly the right thing. Just keep moving. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Come in, Matt. Matt's going to walk past. There he is. That's Matt behind the Buddha. There he is. he just merged with the Buddha right then. Okay.
Ready?
So that was a really good point. Thank you. I'm going to get the answer, and we have to have doing that. Okay, go on, people.
Freddie.
Hi, Venerable. Thank you for your teachings today. I have a question about karma. My father passed away 15 years ago, and my mother and I were on his deathbed. And in hindsight, I wasn't on the Buddhist path at that time, but I had traveled to be there with him. He was passing away from lung cancer. now in hindsight, I look at how terrified he was in those last moments, those true. Is there anything that I can do now to any prayers or mantras that I can offer up? I mean,
absolutely, darling. There's always something. There's always something we can do. Definitely. You know, for example, you know any.
One moment, you're muted, Venerable.
The other thing is,
where are you gone? She's gone. Freddie's gone.
She's kind of next. She's there.
Okay, darling. So, Freddie, do you know any of the practices like the medicine Buddha, for example? Do you know that?
I don't, but I can look it up. Absolutely.
No, sweetheart. Why don't you just? Why don't you just? Maybe mute yourself. That's it. Good, darling. So why don't you, Freddie, why don't you email me and I'll send you a couple of links and send you one. It's robinacorton@mac.com. Tara will give you my email. You email me and I'll send you some stuff, darling. All right? Good, 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 Freddie. Thank you. Who else? Any other questions? Yes, Linda. Was that just you brushing your hair or putting your hand up? Okay, good. Okay. All right, darling. Who else? Anybody else? Okay, let me just, I think all I want you to do is read these course notes. I will say what I have to say and it'll kind of give background and maybe some nuance and flavor, if you like, to the teaching. But all these teachings are so helpful, so good. So just read the course notes. I beg you, read the course notes. Just read the course notes, okay? You get all the nuts and bolts from him. So I think I have to finish. My voice is practically gone. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So I think we've had a good time, a little bit of teachings. You guys do your meditations, you do your discussions, you do your readings, and just keep moving and just keep moving and just keep moving. That's all I can say, okay? I have to shortchange you today. Sorry. Okay, people.
Thank you.
I'll come back with my voice hopefully next week. Thank you, darlings, all of you. So just think this 90 minutes or 85 minutes we've had, whatever it is, 80, whatever it is. Every second we've sowed seeds in our mind. Every moment we're moving our minds forward, going in our own direction, finding our way. How marvelous, how marvelous. And none of it goes astray. That's the biggest thing I think we think in our culture. We know, like, for example, playing music analogy, we know that every day you practice, it's moving you forward. We don't have that view when it comes to producing a happy, wise person, which is all we're trying to do here. Every step is a moving forward. We're moving forward. We're moving forward. Every thought counts. Every word counts. So to be delighted in this, be delighted with our practice. And remember that nothing gets more difficult with practice. Be happy with that. Jangchub, Semchub, Rinpoche, Ma Ke Panam Ke Yuchib, Ke Panyampa, Me Panyang, Gong Ne Gongdu Hobashog. And thank you so much, everybody. Much love to all of you. Thank you so, so much. Thank you, Yuval, for I got the kata. Thank you, everybody, Christy, everybody. And then the questions you all had, Freddie and Amjan, is already good. Thank you, darling. See you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Venerable Ravina.